Hello everyone, this is Darcy here. I got a haircut. This is the second film in the original trilogy, Empire Strikes Back. This one's not directed by George Lucas. It's the first Star Wars movie not to be directed by him, though he's still executive producer. The story of this one is interesting, at least how the movie was made. This is the first movie that George Lucas financed himself, and I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to talk about the movie itself, but it's an interesting story. Just as much as the movie. Now, this movie has a reputation of being the most popular Star Wars movie of all time. It's universally considered by multiple generations of fans to be the best Star Wars movie. Now, I don't share that opinion. I'm not going to tell you what my favorite Star Wars movie is until I get to that movie. But Empire Strikes Back, nevertheless, I have to acknowledge it is probably the best in terms of how it was filmed and how it's acted. I mean, if you look at the actors from A New Hope to this, especially Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher, it's a huge improvement because Carrie Fisher is a terrible actress in the first Star Wars. In this film, it's a huge improvement. And the production values just went up a lot. It's a huge difference from A New Hope to Empire Strikes Back. Empire Strikes Back, is one of the rare occasions at the time, where sequels, at least a sequel, is better than the original. I do think this is better than the original Star Wars. I think it's held up better, Empire Strikes Back. Now, what makes this movie so good? Why is it so beloved by fans? Some people say it's because they like the dark tone of this movie, which I think that's kind of missing the point what makes Empire Strikes Back good. Others thought it had the best story of the 6 films. I could agree on that. But my favorite Star Wars movie I think has the best story of the saga, in my opinion. Not to mention, I do feel like a lot of fans, I don't feel like they really understand why Empire Strikes Back is such a good movie. It's not what makes it good to me is not because it's dark, but I'll get to that later. Now, the action scenes in Empire Strikes Back, I think what stands out for me is the Battle of Hoth. The Battle of Hoth is probably in my opinion, one of the best, battles ever put on screen. It's tense, the atmosphere, the music they play, and even though there's no space battles in this movie, a massive one, it was pretty awesome. I loved the Battle of Hoth. I think the Battle of Hoth is one of my favorite Star Wars battles ever put on screen, and it's better than the Battle of Scarif and Rogue One. Bite me, Rogue One fanboys. And one thing I've noticed about this movie, I'll bring it up probably when I talk about the best and worst Star Wars films. It's amazing just how much the newer films kind of ripped off this film, especially Rogue One. But that's a subject for another video. The characters in this film are better than they are in the first one, and it felt like the actors are more comfortable in the role. Leia and Han, which is the most famous, one of the most famous couples in cinematic history. I felt, they had a good chemistry together. And one thing about this movie? The humor in here was actually funny, unlike Force Awakens. It wasn't forced. They were creative with the humor. And that's one thing I loved. One thing about this movie, this gets better for me the older I get, rather than worse like the newer films. One thing I really loved about the film also is the spiritual aspect of it. It explores the Force, which is something that the first Star Wars, they only talk about it, briefly. It's, with Obi-Wan talks about it, but you don't get to learn more about it. This movie has multiple layers in terms of its plot. And I could do an entire essay probably writing about this, certain things about the Force that's brought up in this film. Yoda He's definitely a great character, and the puppetry for that was amazing. I'm surprised how good that looks. Thank the maker. The version, of course, I've watched. I'm not even sure in the Blu-ray versions if he replaced him with a CGI Yoda. They didn't replace that. It looks so good, and the voice for him, it's amazing. It's like there's so much good about this film that I can't even. I don't feel like I'm doing this justice as talking about it. A thing that I liked about Rogue One, no, this movie actually, was how it foreshadowed stuff later in the film when Luke in the cave, when he's fighting Darth Vader and he sees his face. That's foreshadowing, hit, what will happen if he continues to be reckless, or people can interpret that's it's foreshadowing that he has a connection to Darth Vader, or he can potentially become like Darth Vader if he continues down the path that he's going. This is the movie where I feel like it makes the character of Luke Skywalker on who he is as a person. A New Hope, he's kind of a whiny little brat. Let's be honest. Empire Strikes Back, I feel like it shows the audience how strong Luke is as a character. And Return of the Jedi, I can't wait to talk about that film, only reinforces that, which I'll get into detail about that next time. Han Solo, he's he was great as ever. He says his funny lines, and I like his chemistry with Leia and Chewbacca. And Billy D. Williams as Lando Calrissian. They could have not have cast a better actor for him. He was great. Unlike now, where they force diversity, this feels like a character that Disney could have given us a character like Lando. Instead, they gave us pussies like Finn. Lando was a fucking awesome character in this film, even though he only appears towards the third act. What little time he has in this movie is great. Lando Calrissian is one of my favorite characters in Star Wars, and Billy D. Williams does such a great performance as that character. And what little you see of him, he does some pretty badass shit, and he's very competent and he's intelligent. This movie does a great job with the characterization of all the characters. It's a film that no character feels like is left out. Every character has a chance to shine. And that's something that, unfortunately, the newer films lack. The cliffhanger ending towards the end of the movie, even though it was dark, it did have a sense of hope. And it wasn't an obnoxious cliffhanger like The Force Awakens was. Yeah, I'm going to keep bringing that up. So get used to it, Force Awakens fanboys. The Empire Strikes Back also, I think this is John Williams' best piece of music that he's ever produced. I mean, Yoda's theme has this mystic theme behind it. And when he takes the X-Wing out of the swamp, it's so epic. It's like music in this film, John Williams is a genius, and I feel like that this film is where he was at his best in terms of music. Of course, my actual favorite Star Wars movie is also my second favorite soundtrack that John Williams has ever produced. It's just every theme, suits the situation. It's like Empire Strikes Back, another film where the music is iconic. And John Williams is a great, composer. The lightsaber duel was another one that I love. I love how intense the lightsaber duel was between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. It was really intense. It wasn't, of course, in a New Hope, to be fair, there was barely, there wasn't much they can really work with, and they had a lower budget. They had a higher one. and the person they hired to, fight with, with Darth Vader and Luke, the stunt doubles that actually knew, they actually were trained in actual sword fighting, so it looked like a real a fight with, using swords. And that scene, which is the most famous scene of all time, at least one of them, which is also the most misquoted one, when Darth Vader says, "No, I am your father." This movie has one of the most famous plot twists in cinematic history. Today, this movie wouldn't be able to get away with that. This movie was fortunate it was released at a time when there was no internet. I know people who watch this movie today are not going to have that same impact that they had when my generation watched it. When I was born in between trilogies, so I had that impact. While future generations will not get the same one due to the prequels being out, which is another reason why, if you're gonna have your kids watch, or someone who's never seen Star Wars, you want to have them watch it in released order, not chronological order. Now, other things, I liked about the movie. I liked how each environment, even though A New Hope, each environment was unique, but because they had more production values, it felt like the environments in each scene, managed to tell kind of its own story in a way, what was going on in the scene. The swamps of Dagobah was like, I can't imagine what it was like, creating those sets back in the day. Hoth, it's like there was so much variety. There was never a dull moment. And the chase scene with the Millennium Falcon in the asteroid field, I don't care what fucking shit that The Last Jedi brings out, it will never top that scene with how intense it was. And it's amazing they managed to have the Millennium Falcon fly in such fluid motion despite not having CGI back then. Thank God George Lucas didn't add CGI in that scene in the special editions. But another fortunate thing about Empire Strikes Back, if you're one of those people who despises the special editions, it didn't suffer really any changes with the special editions, except most of it's noticeable in Cloud City, but for the most part, it's pretty much the same. I mean, this movie feels timeless, just like A New Hope. This is a thing that I really love about the original trilogy. Even though I love the prequels, I am acknowledge that they don't hold up as well as the original trilogy. These movies feel timeless. This movie has science fiction mixed with fantasy, and I feel like it is a really good film and the best in terms of how it was made. From a filmmaking perspective, I think if you're going to teach someone how to make a movie, at least a sequel, I think Empire Strikes Back is a movie you should recommend. It's one of the greatest sequels ever made. Along with Terminator 2, Aliens 2. See, I'm just trying to think of sequels. Because back when sequels weren't uncommon, because for those who are watching this who were born after the 80s and were born in the late 1990s to early 2000s, sequels were not very common. They really weren't. Yes, you did get sequels before I was born, but they weren't frequent. For every Planet of the Apes, most movies just were one film. It wasn't until Star Wars, which started the sequel craze that's currently in Hollywood, which even though I don't hate Star Wars for doing that, because it's not the film's fault, but it's an interesting thing in cinematic history for those who are watching this who weren't born between trilogy, but you were born during the prequels or after the prequels. Now, what do I give this film? It should be obvious. I give it a 5 out of 5 stars. It's not my favorite Star Wars movie, but at least from a filmmaking perspective, it has to get a 5 out of 5 stars because it is a good movie. But for me, it's a 4 out of 5 stars. This may seem blasphemy to some people, but remember, 5 out of 5 stars is from a filmmaking perspective. 4 out of 5 is my opinion. It's a good movie, and I think you should watch it. Stop wasting your time watching this video and buy a copy of Empire Strikes Back along with the others. This movie it's a great film that has stood the test of time, and 40 years more in the future, it will still be a good movie. This is Darcinovia over and out. May the Force be with you. And next time I review a Star Wars film, we're going to talk about my favorite in the original trilogy, Return of the Jedi. Have a good day, everyone.